1. We made it. We made it. We made it. We made it. Bryson, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing good. Um, Touchy subject matter. I know you reached out to me with a little hesitation. Thank you for showing up and doing this with me. Um,
Absolutely.
it's a touchy subject matter when it shouldn't be. I think there's a lot of good points. I'm not sure if you and I are going to agree or disagree on everything, but we'll get through that. But let's set a base level. Speech in VR. Before we get into the facets of it, why is it important to you? Why is this a subject matter that even though it's touchy, even though you were nervous and I was nervous, why are
hmm
we here talking about this right now? Why is it important?
I think it's important because not because of the intention of people who advocate for hate speech is trying to mitigate harm. I think it's important to talk about it now because it can lead to something that is more outside the scope than what's intended to protect users against. So I think a big kind of overarching way that I view it is right now it's just hate speech on social media. And there are certain terms or phrases that people can agree upon, and you say, okay, I can identify that as being hurtful to someone or harmful to someone. And generally people can agree that that's something that they maybe don't like to have said to them, and you can usually mute them or block them or what have you if you need to now. But what I'm more concerned about is in the future with VR specifically, how hate speech can turn into hateful actions or hateful gestures that aren't under the purview of like a hate speech policy today. So something like harassment, fine, totally, inappropriate, shouldn't be doing it in any kind of social space or app or game. But I think that just like we've seen hate speech kind of take over this more broad understanding of it depending on which person you're talking to. I think the same can be said for hateful actions or gestures that you're making. And it's not that you're, not even that, but it's that Facebook is collecting all this data on you and it's linked to your personal profile so that maybe in like 5 or 6 years from now, when you're going about your day, someone pulls up your profile and it's like, oh, this thing that you did 5 or 6 years ago in a virtual space that isn't indicative of something that you may have done in the real world. And I just think that it's good to kind of uh, reel back on this before it gets to the point where it's out of control. And I think there are some good examples that I could bring up that maybe highlight how it's, the fringe cases, but highlight how it's gotten out of control in the real world. So,
So before we get into and we jump that shark and go right to it in VR, let's set just a ground level. The way hate speech or speech on social media is handled right now, the ways that they're mitigating it and using it, and that could be Facebook or any social media. I don't want to only buzz on Facebook here.
right, right.
Is it appropriate the way they're doing it now? Or are we handling it semi well? If you had to give thoughts on the current way that we handle speech before we jump this to VR, how are we
Mhm.
handling this? Well, good, bad?
I think it depends on the case, honestly, but I think generally speaking, it's more it does more harm to the overall public discourse than it does good. Because I think you can say things that are hateful that are actually hateful if you look at the context, and you just may not like it. And there's a group of people that not every instance, not every, I don't want to make it seem like a broad statement, a blanket statement, but there are those people who go out there and look to see if they can get someone canceled or something like that. I mean, and that's kind of an overblown term at this point, but if you there are certain people on social media who love nothing more than to try to destroy lives. They watch out, they look out for those instances of someone saying something that someone just even may pretend to take offense to, and they might get banned off of social media, or they might get canceled from their job, or their employer might, reprimand them for something that, two or three people may have coordinated to have happen. And those are obviously fringe cases. But I think just the fact that that's allowable now for that to happen means that we're not handling it that well. I think
Okay.
it needs to be more of a, if you're going to do it, I understand it's a private company, but it, it should stay to the private company outside of like actual harassment, illegal activity, things like that.
Can I
So,
ask you what the difference would be? It's tough. So the private company, I have a love hate with it. Yes, there are times where a company does something I really disagree with, and I don't think they should have the power to do that. Once you give the power to someone to do X, it's almost
Mhm.
impossible to take that power back. It's no different than an election year when someone wants the power to do one thing. Even if I don't believe in that party's vision of said thing they're trying to propose, I got to be real
Mhm.
careful because if I say it's okay, I need or say it's bad, and it goes through, I need to be equally okay if my party uses that because it could be bad both ways.
Right.
It's harder to take something away than it is to give it. When it comes to social media right now, before we jump this to VR,
Yeah.
are you looking for it to be open completely? Does there need to be checks?
Well, if in my ideal world, I would say that anything that is of the respective countries, the the law, like if you follow the law, I think that if social media companies, especially when you're going into putting yourself into VR where it's you're more embodied in the space that you're saying things in, if it had a more legal framework about that, then I think that would be more acceptable. I'm not. I would say I'm a free speech absolutist, but I know some people would take that to take it to the most extreme possible. I don't think anything that's meant to be truly harassment in the sense of like, a legal definition or truly hateful to the point where it's just, advocating for some kind of harm or threat or something like that. I don't think that those things should be allowed. Pornography, stuff like that, just illegal action in general. But outside of that, I mean, I think it should be open.
Okay.
I think that's the way that you exchange ideas because there are a couple of examples that I can think of right off the top of my head where it's publications have changed the way a message is presented based on perceived hurtful language. And I think that when you start getting into that, that it becomes a huge issue where, if I'm trying to talk to you about X, but I really need to talk about Y and Z to get around to X, then you might miss the true meaning of what I'm trying to discuss, but
Mhm.
it might be considered hateful to some people to discuss that. And I think that that's kind of where we're headed as a society, and I don't like that, and I want to kind of curb that before it gets too embedded into virtual reality as a whole.
Sure. I've seen things online that I heavily disagree with. There's things that I worry, especially for having a kid, how to mitigate
Right.
them through that minefield. I understand wanting it to be completely open, and I think it's like a 50-50 split. 50% of the time, I'm 100% down with it. Let it be open. But then I also think of the different social medias like Facebook, for example. I have a Facebook profile. I have to have it when I got an Oculus Quest. I've had one since I was 18. My sister made it for me going to college. I don't use it. It's there. I don't particularly use it. I don't particularly care for it. I find that at least how I've curated it poorly. I see a lot of things I don't like. I have no problem if someone stepped in and curated it better for me, and I'd be more happy with it. Twitter, on the other hand, I have a very loving relationship with Twitter, but at the same time, I did censor it in a way. If there was something I heavily disagree with that I saw as hateful, as something that just no, it's immediately hitting my brain and triggering me in a
Mhm.
way that's affecting me IRL when it shouldn't, it's blocked.
Right.
I've curated
Right.
an echo chamber that maybe isn't, it's not an echo chamber of positivity, but it's an echo chamber that I feel safe that whenever I go through Twitter, I'm either going to learn something, see something I
Mhm.
disagree with in a tasteful manner. But I have, in a way, censored myself. But it sounds like you're more in the camp where if you choose to do that, that's on good on you. But you don't
Right.
want the entity doing it for you. Am I reading that
I don't
right?
want the entity doing it for us, and I also don't want a few quote unquote bad actors to dictate what the entity does for the individual that would have otherwise let the speech be. I don't have any problem with, if you don't like what someone's saying, to block them or mute them, whatever. That's your interaction with them. That's perfectly fine. I do think it causes an echo chamber, but that's a different topic,
Sure.
in general. But I think that it's gotten to the point where now individuals can just claim something as hateful, and then if they get enough of a fervor about it, then the social media company will take action punitively. And I don't agree with that. I think it should be at the very least. I mean, this is not what I would want, but at the very least, there needs to be just strict, straight standards. There's no kind of mob rule in this sense, and I see a lot of mob rule going on specifically in Twitter, but but it what I would want is something more concrete, and I think more objective. And I don't think that hate speech, just by its very nature, I don't think that it can be quantified 100% of the time.
Mhm.
Because, if I was to say to you, pick 5 people, have them write 100 terms that are considered, words that are hate speech or phrases that are hate speech, you might get 20 or 30 of those terms to be similar or the same, but the 60 or 70% of the rest of the terms are going to be completely different. And if you take those same people and you spread them across and they have a large following, that they could, there's no uniformity in it. That's
Sure.
one of my main concerns with it.
It's problem when you say mob rule. The problem is if you dictate. Well, there's many problems, but to my personal problem is that if you dictate your worth based on your social status on Twitter or something, there's a problem there. You should be able to disconnect immediately. If
Mhm.
you are not financially independent from your social presence, it's a big problem. That's going to dictate all the social pressures are going to dictate what you do. But if you're
Right.
financially independent and the social part of you is just another part, it's easier to disconnect. Let's bring this though into VR. Now, this is obviously a topic that we can't blanket statement this. There's probably bits
Mhm.
and pieces that we're going to have to just split this up to. I'll start with one. I'm sure you have plenty, but let me get us started down a path. Let's talk about kids in VR, because that I feel like is probably the lowest of hanging fruits when we talk about policing
Mhm.
speech, rec room, VR chat, any social function. What do we do about protecting speech with kids around, in your opinion?
I think it needs to be monitored, but it depends on what you mean by protected, right? Because
Hmm.
I can say a kid harassing another kid, maybe they're too young and they don't know the system or whatever, and they don't know how to mute them. That might be one issue. But then if you have, a kid talking to another kid and they're saying something that they don't like or is making them upset and they're not choosing to use that function, I I don't know. I mean, it really, and I know I'm kind of going off on this one specific instance, but like, it really depends on what you mean for protected. Because, like, obviously,
Well, here I could jump in
predators,
and give you what I
or
can. I jump in real quick, and I'll give you what
sure.
I think about with protection because I agree with you. It's a vague. When I say protection, I'm not saying protect them from arguments, from bullies, or protect them from every little thing that's harm. When I say protect, I mean that there has to be some type of tool or understanding of how you could mitigate the situation. Doesn't mean I need to protect the situation from ever happening. That is an impossible task in my mind. But I would like the user to at least understand the tools provided to help protect those situations, if that makes
I
sense.
think in that instance, you could do something to the effect of like have them have an easy accessible button to maybe, like I think Facebook has done work on this where you can just make yourself invisible, in certain space, or make it easily accessible for them to kind of mute everyone around them, or to make specific individuals invisible. You know, I think that the emphasis needs to be on the user's ability to make that choice and not for the kind of moderators to make that choice for them, except for the instances of like actual legal activity or, true harassment. Um, I think that it's all about kind of conveying the idea that, you have the option if you don't like something to take action on your behalf, that it shouldn't be up to other moderators to maybe do it for you. Now, obviously, if it's a small child that doesn't know what they're doing, then there needs to be some kind of oversight. But I think it could be something as simple as like a moderator that goes around certain rooms and you know moderates for a set period of time.
Speaking of
Like
that,
in an
have you been
ideal,
part of Facebook Horizon at all? Bringing up that moderator
no, no.
stance?
They sent me a beta invite code, but I couldn't get into it when I tried to get log in.
Oh,
So I've seen a lot of videos of it though.
so you're not missing anything. I'll just be honest. The platform itself, I don't think they figured out what they want to do with it. I can tell at one point they wanted it to be a creator hub, or excuse me, a hub where they were creating things so people could enjoy.
Mhm.
It seems to have shifted back to a VR chat model where they're expecting people to build, which I think is the correct model. But they seem to be so wishy washy that that's going to hamper the experience. But
Right.
that's not the point. The point of my comment bringing up Facebook Horizon is they do have a moderator right when you enter the world. At first, I was against this concept. I don't particularly care for someone to be in there watching me right away. I was
Mhm.
wrong. I actually really enjoyed that moderator being there. It was as simple as someone I walked in. He said, "Hey, is this your first time here?" Probably knows it because this is a hardcore beta. He knows that most people are going to be first time users.
Right.
He asked me. I was a little shocked that it was a real person, not an NPC. I said, "Yep." He didn't guide me in any sense of negativity. He didn't pound rules into my head. He said, "Hey, man, this social experiences can be a little crazy. If you have questions, concerns, or need help, I'm here." And that's it. He said, "Hey, if you don't know where to go, that world over there is pretty cool."
Mhm.
Really, I didn't like Facebook Horizon, but that moment really I liked having someone there who worked for the
Right.
company who made me feel a little more secure. In the sense
Mhm.
that if I have a problem, hey man, at least we can talk it out. You might not be able to do shit for me, but we can talk it out.
Right.
I don't know. I respected that decision quite a bit. I'd be
Yeah,
open to seeing something like that.
I think they also have something like that in alt space. Maybe I've seen a couple of moderators in different spaces there that get paid to basically go around the rooms and if there's a certain number of people in there. Um, but yeah, I think that is something that is doable. I think that is something that I would personally be okay with. I mean, I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that if they had an objective standard of kind of strict guidelines that you could go in reference to. I think that's fine,
Hmm.
especially because you can reason with an individual that you're virtually face to face with versus maybe someone who's like at an admin, some kind of administrator somewhere, thousands of miles away that you may not know what they're going to do or how they're going to do it.
Hmm.
So
I don't know who the quote was, but one of the articles that you had sent me just for references, so we could kind of be on the same page of where this conversation may
sure.
be going. I don't know who said it, but I really enjoyed the quote about VR being a future like empathy machine. And I bring that up because you
Mhm.
just spoke about the face to face rather than keyboard to keyboard. This is a bit of a tangent, but let's get into that. Since you are going to be face to face with somebody in VR, is
Mhm.
VR an empathy building machine, or is that more of a talking point to raise funds for that platform?
I think I think it can be, and I kind of want to bring in a personal experience with this.
Yes.
So when I first got into VR, my like first social experience was this like it was like a group of people who were in this like crude unity like cafe asset, and there were like eh, probably like 10 or 12 people, and they were all in the same avatar. At this point, it was only 3 DOF. There was no movement of any kind. They all kind of in T pose, and they had us like go around in a circle and kind of give our name and kind of what we do and why we love VR. Well, I have really bad social anxiety, generally speaking. And it was surprising to me that when I got in this group, all of a sudden, all the kind of normal ways that I would feel kind of transferred into my virtual, avatar with me being in my avatar. And it was shocking, but it was also kind of cool because I was like, okay, this is pretty neat that I'm like around this, not even like lifelike avatars, and I'm still getting this sense of social anxiety. Well, we went around and I kind of stuttered and stammered and couldn't really give out a good explanation of who I am, why I love VR, that kind of stuff. After the group disbanded, the leader of the group came over and he was like, "Hey, man, and this might be sorry if this is offensive to anyone, but I just want to say what he said, just to kind of
Sure.
make a point here." So he said, "Hey, man, look, I appreciate you coming in here. I know it's hard for you to speak to us. We have an autism group that comes in every other week, and we'd be more than happy to have you come in and and speak with them." And I was like, I had to kind of explain to him. I was like, look, it's not that. It's just that I'm really nervous. And but I highlight that to say that even in the early days, this was DK1 days. So even in the early days, they already had a specific group of people that were, 4 people that were had autism spectrum disorder, or were on the spectrum rather. And I think that there are instances in which it could really be an empathy machine. But I don't think it needs to be at the expense of hindering speech for the sake of just empathy every day, all day. Because I think that's a very short sighted utopian vision that isn't going to mimic the real world at all. And you might argue, well, VR is not like the real world. There are definitely, ways that we can improve the virtual space, separate from, detached from the real world. But I think there needs to be that understanding that it's not all going to be for justice or for empathy or for some kind of utopian vision of the future, because I don't think that includes the human element in that. That includes a very idealized view of every single group interaction you ever have in the future with VR. I think if you were to have that, you wouldn't have any real, you wouldn't really have any real interactions except for like very jovial, happy interactions all the time. Maybe that's what you want, but I think VR is more broad than that. I think that kind of taking that away, taking that element of maybe conflict away would mitigate real progress being made in conversation or dialogue or exchange of ideas that maybe you can't have, in your city or your town or wherever you live.
Does the
So,
empathy machine, though, when we talk about it that way, is it just the verbal cues, though, where the machine part is? Because in my mind, I'm thinking the empathy part could just be on the gestures, which we brought up before. As small as I just had an experience in Respite VR.
mhm,
It's a theater play that you are a participant of in VR chat. I'll actually be talking to them either Thursday or Tuesday on stream. And I've already been in that.
mhm,
And something as small as a parental figure in game who was taller than me, the perspective I was
mhm.
looking up, who knelt
Yeah,
down and gave me a hug and met and we knelt down, eye to eye, asked for a hug. 100% empathy building.
yeah,
It went from acting. So when I say an empathy machine, I don't think empathy machine starts with verb. I think it actually starts with the avatar to avatar, i.e., human to human connection. Someone in the chat brought up like population one and someone teabagging you when you're dead. Yeah, that's a big part of an empathy building machine. That huge gesture based society that
mhm.
a gesture that's on a 2D screen that you I'm not
Might
looking
not,
up.
right,
It's meaningless. I'm
right.
gonna look away from the screen. I don't
Can
care.
transfer that experience, right?
But it transfers tremendously different inside VR, and that's where the empathy
Mhm,
machine to me is so powerful. I didn't plan to buy into a hug. I didn't plan to hug anybody, but I actually
yeah,
felt pressured to do it in a good way, and
mhm.
it changed my feelings dramatically on that experience. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that note, I think there are certain journalist outlets like the New York Times who have gone out to, forgive me for not knowing, but third world countries and kind of highlighted certain villages that are very, with like a 360-degree camera.
Mm-hmm.
Even that experience, even though that's not a specific virtual space, you're still encapsulated in this 360 experience, and you can see what their lives are like, and you can see, the little girl being emaciated. You can actually get that feeling of, oh my gosh, these are not just people on the stream trying to give them like 9 cents a day or something like that. Um, I think that it has a tremendous possibility to create empathy and to even express empathy, like you were saying with that experience. Um, it also has a tremendous advantage in being able to recreate like a sense of actually putting yourself in someone else's shoes completely, like you were saying. Like you're not going to be, what was the character, like a little girl that you
Yeah,
play or
I was just a
something like
little
that,
kid. I was a
right?
little kid.
Right. And that's, can be really eye-opening for some people. And I think that's good, to have that possibility. But I don't think it needs to be something that is meant to just steer the technology in the direction of that being the primary focus. And I think I see a lot of good-hearted people with good intentions that are trying to make this into kind of more of a very empathetic, like you're saying, empathy machine, rather than just a tool that can do empathy. I think those experiences are great though. I think there was one where you could walk around and see homeless people. I forget what the name of it though. You can walk
Mm.
around and see homeless people in the city and like see how they live and actually follow their life and see them going into a tent and how they live their days. Um, those are invaluable experiences that I think if you saw them on TV, you might bat an eye and go about your day and not have any thought about it afterwards. But I think that, yeah, I think you're right. That's
I've seen a few of those kind of experiences. You brought up the homeless one. There's that one. I do not know the names of any of these, which is a disservice to these, but there's that one. There's one that I believe there's one that's a child is on the autism spectrum that you're first person view in their eyes for the day. There's one where you're in the car getting pulled over where you are an African American.
Right.
There's one that you're inside a prison cell with prisoners. There's all these things that are trying to build empathy, which I think are important. Now we're speaking a lot in general terms here of what
Sure.
what our ideals are. Let's pick a specific VR experience. Let's target a little more
Okay.
now. Let's pick one that you think is either doing it right. You can take the liberty on it. One that's maybe doing it right, maybe one that's doing it wrong. What are you seeing from specific social VR games or experiences right now that are either encouraging to, hey, we're going down the right path, or alternatively, maybe we're going down the wrong path? What are you seeing that sparks you so much to want to talk about this?
I personally see that right now, VR chat and Altspace are doing the right things. And I think that their model going forward, it doesn't need to be altered dramatically. I don't think, having a mute button or a block button, and again, I'm going back to that, I know, but there isn't a specific game or social experience that I think is doing something heinously wrong at this point. But my concern is going further than it already is right now, or it gives the user the option. And I think VR chat does that great. You have a mute button, you have a block button. I think Altspace does it great with a mute button, block button, and having a moderator in there,
Mm-hmm.
especially with like very live events. I know they have moderators there monitoring and stuff just for those specific instances of like a show or someone doing a concert or something like that. I think those are good steps. And I think that if it stuck to that, I think I wouldn't really have any concern, but there seems to be a lot of
It sounds like you do have some concern of where it might be going, is what I'm kind of getting the vibe
yeah,
on.
yeah. Well, I mean, you have like New Zealand that's studying hate speech, how it spreads, and specifically with VR, kind of mimicking how you go from like reading something on a cell phone to committing some kind of hate speech act online. And they're trying to, study the transferring of like bad ideas, incorporating you to commit hate speech and then further hurting someone else. Or the ADL working with all the social media companies to try to create hate speech AI to monitor hate speech in general. And those things, obviously, they're outside of VR, but they do have their sights on VR, and that's kind of what I'm concerned about. Is that the 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 externalities that you have, or the fringe cases that you have here, bleeding into VR because it is just a natural progression. I think people right now would say, well, okay, like Twitter is doing a good job for the people who want hate speech policies. Twitter's doing a great job. I have no problem with Twitter's AI or Twitter's um, infrastructure going into my VR space, and I don't agree with that. And I think that you know a lot of these corporations or legal entities kind of make their bones off of peddling this kind of hate speech AI or hate speech policy, what do they call it, studies and stuff like that, to try to get more funding so they can continue on with that. And I don't think it comes from a necessarily good intention place. I don't think it comes from a good place.
Well, we got to be
I,
fair about that. I feel like in a way, like as much as I have progressively become more and more worried with Facebook's policies. I do get worried. But to be fair, the wokeness of wanting to create a safe space is in their best interest when it comes to investors, when it comes into building relationships with partners to build these platforms. I can't be blind to say that they're doing it because they want to control speech. They probably have a degree mostly where they're trying to control the profitability of their platform, the advertisability. I don't even think that's a word, but the ability to advertise on their platform. They're really, if we're going to be fair, probably more trying to protect profits in advertising than they are canceling or controlling speech. At least that's my view on it.
I would say, I mean, to a degree, you're right, but I think that's what a lot of people fall back on and say, well, they're just looking out for their investors, they're just looking out for their customers, they're just looking out for, um, you know, to make sure that they're profitable. I think that that's kind of a way to maybe not put as much blame on the actual focus of what they're doing rather than why they're doing it. I think, uh, yes, they do it to make sure that they're, not going to lose investors, but also, you know, highlighting, for the ADL as an example.
Hmm.
highlighting a list of people
Can you explain what
that
that
are
is for people
hateful.
in the chat?
Sure, it's the Anti-Defamation League. They're formed primarily to mitigate, I don't keep saying mitigate, but to protect the First Amendment. They kind of started as a human rights group, and over time they've become more of an advocacy group. And to have something where you have this group that's working towards creating an AI to kind of monitor speech throughout Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, that also on their site happens to have a list of all the hateful people, who spread hateful
Wait, so you're
ideas and
saying
hateful
that this
chants.
place literally named blast people who they feel
Well,
they
they
disagree with?
don't go out and they don't say like, oh, this person, but they do have a list of
Okay.
people who are hateful people, and the SPLC does this too, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and most of the time when there's hate speech involved, they're both kind of involved in it in some way, and they do make their profits off of kind of creating this. Maybe I shouldn't say it this way, but like a boogeyman of hate speech being everywhere because they're saying, there's a cause for this. You need to mitigate this. You need to stop this somehow. And they get their funding from that. They get their funding from there being a problem. Like a lot of politicians, they campaign on issues that they're never going to solve, but they get in, on the promise of that. And I think they kind of operate to a certain extent in that realm as well. You can't get all the funding's going to drive if there's no problem to solve. And I think that they've been able to profit off of that pretty well. So,
So I think
but that's
Vapori
a very
Beat, sorry man, I didn't mean to cut you off, but Vapori Beat in the chat, I think brings up a good point and maybe a good segue into our next topic. So when
sure.
it comes to policing speech, policing on anything, we probably will not have much say in whatever Facebook,
Absolutely.
whatever HCC, whatever Valve,
Sure.
whatever their policies are, we're not going to have much say in it. But we can maybe discuss what worst case may be. That might be the wrong term. But when it comes to speech and policing it, where's the line tip on punishment for you? So, for example, I can think of a couple punishments. You could have a complete removal from a platform, which to me is
Sure.
ultimately probably the worst punishment you could ever get in today's society. Being removed from a platform, that's removing your voice, your power, especially when the
Mhm.
internet's becoming so much of an actual like I talked to someone the other day about cell phones. I think these
Right.
are what's the word I'm looking for? Necessities. If you do not have
Yep.
a smartphone, you are starting at a disadvantage compared to somebody. And to be kicked off
Absolutely.
from a platform of information, it's a severe disadvantage. Where does the punishments? Where's the punishment allowed? What is the degree of punishment for someone who is abusing teabagging? Brought that in population one. Abusing when haptics become something in VR. Abusing a touch. What punishment fits the crime to you when it comes to virtual reality? Because that's going to mimic real life more than traditional gaming.
Right. Right. I think it's case by case and company by company and game by game or social experience by social experience. But I think that it should not be a blanket because the worst case scenario would be, say, you get caught committing hate speech or doing some kind of hateful action. I think it'll lead into hateful gestures that aren't covered under some kind of harassment policy
Can you give any
already.
examples of them?
Um, well, you could make something say today that's not considered hateful that 5 years from now is considered hateful, and then someone go back and you know I don't want to give necessarily examples.
I'll give you an
Just
example. How about that? I'll
okay,
give you I'll give
sure,
you I'll give you one example, and it's real low hanging fruit, real not obtrusive, but finger tracking, middle finger.
yeah,
It is
yeah,
a cuss word. It is obscene to some. I don't particularly think it is. But could we get into policing hand tracking middle fingers? I think that's a thought.
yeah, yeah. So if you had that, I mean, if you had someone that was just so offended by the middle finger, I mean that's a possibility. You can get two or three or four people that really don't like that, and they could get someone to overlook that kind of and take that person away. But if if that was to happen, I think it should be a temporary ban because specifically with VR, you're not banning someone from just access to something. You're banning someone from being able to portray their identity in a space. So, you could have venues foreseeably in the future. You could have venues that are, I mean, you already have them now, but more mainstream venues where it's specifically in VR. Like you have a concert that you want to go to in VR, but it's only in VR, and you can only access it in VR. You only access it through Facebook's platform or something like that. Well, then you've been barred from that, or you've been barred from something else that's uh, VR town square or something to that effect, where information is being exchanged in a kind of a Twitter or Facebook feed kind of way. I think that those things are things that could happen, where you could just be banned from using any Facebook headset because it's connected to your own identity. I think that a temporary ban, maybe a three strikes and you're not able to interact with certain areas, but I think a full scale ban is kind of what I'm afraid of it eventually becoming. At least in the sense of, Facebook controls Facebook spaces, Facebook venues, video platforms, things like that, to say that, oh, you've done this thing that we deemed as hateful in this one experience, maybe with these set people, that's not to say that you're going to do that for every situation and every case, and then we're going to ban you outright.
Hmm.
I think that's where it could lead, though.
I have a
I
big
don't.
fear of that. I have an extremely big fear of that. I think being banned off social media is probably one of the worst things that could ever happen to someone. That sounds
Yeah.
convoluted, sounds bad, but the internet has created a information gap between some people. There is someone right now in the world who does not have access to internet, depending on where they are, that may be a future revolutionary, a future genius that could have changed the world for the better, but the severe lack of information that they had the access to just shaped what they were able to accomplish. And I think daily on how many people who do not have access to X or Y that I take for granted maybe could have done something much better than what I'm doing it
Yeah.
for. And to hear that someone could be banned from a future computing platform, which it very well most likely will be if Zuckerberg believes in that and takes it. I think that most recent report that just came out, I may try to link that in the description, was that currently Facebook is losing between 3 to 4 billion a year for virtual reality. Tells you what they believe will be the next computing platform. And if you do not have access to that platform, you're at a huge disadvantage. And I think of
And
people who
not
could
only that,
revolutionally
but
change the
how are
world. Go ahead.
say you have I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
say
no,
you
go
have a
ahead.
company that's using that Nets computing platform, how are you going to be able to use the services of that company? If you can't access the Nets computing platform, or say if there's a job that's specific to a computing platform. I can see a job where, I mean, they do it with Apple all the time, where you use Apple MacBooks or something like that to access things, and obviously that's completely different, but say you're using Facebook AR headset, and you can't log in because it's connected to your identity in some way, and that you've been banned in this one thing a year ago. Um, I think another point of that is just as far as access to information. I don't mean to derail it all, but I think a point that I wanted to bring up, and I'm not really sure if this is the right spot to bring it up, but I wanted to just kind of put out maybe a different view on
Hmm.
why I feel strongly about this that isn't necessarily connected to VR, but definitely could be. So there was an article written in May of this year where a woman who was running, I think, in high school, she was a high school runner, and she was competing. She was like the top in the state. She was a top female runner in the state, and she was competing against two transgender female athletes. And as far as I know, these two transgender female athletes were not in the top of their own male bracket when they were identifying as male. And she was having to compete against them, and she mentioned something like those two transgender females had won like something like 13 out of 15 competitions or something to that effect. The issue wasn't about that. The issue was, so in May she writes this article, and the article it says something like, I don't have any problem with transgender individuals. This isn't something hateful that I'm spouting. This is me trying to explain, I'm competing as a female in with these transgender females who are male, and they have a physical advantage because they have a male body. Okay. So she writes this article in the USA Today. 3 days later, USA Today edits out every instance of male and and translates that to transgender athlete. And they do it, and they say they have a little blurb update on the article that says, "Update: We've updated this to better reflect, our guidelines. We are apologizing if this causes any kind of hurt, because this causes hurtful uses hurtful language." I think is what they use. Uses hurtful language. Now, you and I can probably understand, can probably infer what she was meaning by that article. But just by the mere edit of the article, you've effectively made the entire point of the article moot because of some perceived hate speech that someone has experienced just from reading the word "a male athlete," or an athlete, a transgender athlete with a male body, right? So, and that's nothing that I can say, oh, here in VR, oh, this it's happening right here. But the way that this is happening, this just happened a few months ago. So the
Can we
way that
get
this
into
is
gender a
happening,
little bit though? Can we get into this in the sense that so you and I spoke about this pre-stream, and I made a tweet about it a little bit before the stream. Last night I was in VR chat. I'm trying to find
mm,
Joshua Corvinus said it best. I couldn't I didn't verbalize it right. But I'm trying right now to get more into VR chat. I'm actually really, really enjoying it. But I'm trying to find an avatar that I bond with. And I have not been able to find that. Last night I went through the VR Avatar Museum and VR chat, not specifically
mhm,
to find an avatar. I just thought it looked cool. And there was 37 rooms. Each room had about 5, 6 avatars. So we're talking, you know, 180, 230 avatars probably by the end of this. Most of them were female. I don't know. I identify I'm not looking to be a female avatar, but I'm also not looking to be a masculine one. I'm just looking to find one that I
mhm.
embody. But when it comes to discussions like this, I know where you're going with that discussion. Like 100% know where you're going with that. I get it. When it goes to the VR space, though, do you think those discussions break down a little bit where gender, where sex becomes much more fluid in VR? Because I would say 90% of the avatars I looked at, maybe one out of every
Mhm.
five in that museum was a male based avatar. Because of that, it seems like there's a pretty big acceptance of gender fluidity in VR chat, especially. Do these discussions get easier? Maybe. Let's cup half full. Maybe the gender discussions for virtual reality get actually much easier because you just see such a diverse group of gender fluidity in it.
Right,
Something I
right. And
noticed.
I think that makes it much easier for someone to come in there and, if they identify as a female when they're male or vice versa, they could identify how they want to, and they could look how they want to, and they could act how they want to. I know that there are a few, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I think there are even a few VR YouTubers who do this or claim to have this, an avatar that they identify with as their own persona. That's who they
Hmm.
are, in their mind. But I think that make it makes the arguments or the discussions about this a lot easier because it's not like you're having to even in like simple things like having to address someone as a female when they really want to identify as a male and you've misgendered them somehow and that causes some kind of stress or harm to them. They could easily just go into the female avatar,
Hmm.
or
It's a good point.
or even voice modification, voice modulation. I think personally, I don't think that I think there could be some things that are wrong with that, but for casual conversation or for something that isn't something where you need to show some representation of who you truly are, I think that that's perfectly fine too. And I think that makes someone because at the end of the day, in that instance, there is no reason to even want to care at that point. Because there's no reality check that you need to have with that. You can view your own reality. I mean, I've seen just today, I saw people like in VR chat. I was in VR chat today, and someone like had a soda can as their avatar, and that's silly, but like I didn't know if they were male or female or whatever because it didn't matter, and it wasn't something that I would address them as they or whatever. But I think that it does give a really good sense of self-expression. Um, Also, interestingly, at your point, going back to your point about the theater experience that you had, where you were a little child and
Yep.
the adults were taller. There's a study by the Virtual Human Interaction Lab in Stanford where they took groups of people and they modulated their height in virtual reality. So they either made them shorter or taller than they were. Of course, they had a control group too. They didn't do anything too. But they found that the people who were taller uh, experienced more confidence throughout the week than the people who were
Mm.
shorter. And I think one of the really interesting, this is a side tangent, but I think one of the really interesting things about VR is that you can explore, okay, is that because of some kind of social stigma of being taller than shorter, or is that because you literally see more of the world around you and you can, be more confident when you're taking your steps or whatever. And those things are we can pinpoint in a way that specifically with psychology studies, but those are things we can pinpoint in a way we couldn't do before. And I think that it honestly could be, that could be used as a tool to help people who have gender dysphoria. You know, it, because it's hard for kids with gender dysphoria to be able to have, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity when they're struggling with that. I can't speak on everyone, but I've personally interacted with in my day-to-day job. I've interacted with plenty of gender dysphoria children who, they want to be called um, she, her, they want to be called a different female name, but their parents maybe, really don't like that about them or don't want to give into that, don't want to take them to therapy for that. Well, in VR, they could have a way to kind of express themselves that isn't causing strife in the household and isn't making, has an escape for them. I think those are really positive things about VR
I
altogether.
agree. I agree, and I very much hope they it stays that way. I hope no one's policing that. I can't tell you the sense of like I don't know who it was, but like last night there was some like 30-foot transformer. I don't know what their day to day. No, like I know it is. I
Yeah,
looked up. I'm like, it's stupid, but it's like, what if that person like they don't have to care? They can be
right,
whoever they want.
right.
There's no stigma. Hey, chat. Guess what? I'm 5'7". That's pretty fucking short when it comes to a person. My sister is 2 years younger and 4 inches taller. And
Oh
there's all
man.
these stigmas of
Yeah.
like, being called her younger brother the entire life. As a kid, yeah, that bugged me. As an adult, a lot less. But these are
Mhm.
all things in VR chat that are going to, or any social VR experience doesn't even be VR chat, that are going to lead to a much healthier possible mindset, which is why I'm with you that I'm open to speech being much more free in virtual reality. I think when people hear free speech, and this kind of harps back to what we are talking about earlier, and you say anything goes, it opens up a can of worms in real life. In real
Right.
life, it does. If anything goes, that's saying, hey, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad. I think people are generally good, so I don't think the bad outweighs the good. However, you're opening up a can of worms for potential problems. But when it comes to VR, the problems that can be are not really problems per se right now in VR. What your gender is, if you choose to be, not choose, if you identify as a female or male in VR, the stigma or the repercussions or just the uncomfortabilities that can be IRL, they're gone. They're gone in VR.
Mhm.
I don't know who the hell you are.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are. You come over to me, whether it's, and you brought a voice modulation earlier, whether you change your voice, if you change your appearance, I don't know you. Who you present yourself as is all I'm going to perceive you as. If you come off as a female based avatar, female voice, and you're nice, that's all I care about. You're nice.
Yeah.
The female in the voice was meaningless. You were nice. That's who you are now. We can
Right.
talk, we can be. But in real life, regardless of my views, I don't care who you identify with in real life, but I still need to navigate the maybe the ambiguous gender. I might have to navigate that discussion and ask, and that could be uncomfortable. Um, but virtual reality, I think that's why I'm with you on the free speech entirely, because the paradigms of where it can get uncomfortable IRL really are meaningless inside virtual reality, at least in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And I think that that's the whole point of it, right? Is that you don't need to be based in reality, and you can even express a part of yourself that maybe you can in reality either way. Whether that be gender identity or whether that be or sort of confidence that you can't express in your day-to-day life because the circumstances of your life don't allow for that, or something to that effect. Or you can even grow as a person, and that can translate over to your real life. I think there are many ways that it could be beneficial in that sense. And I think, going back to free speech, I think that that is something that, uh, in that aspect, no, especially in today's climate, no one would dare. say, oh, you have to be this way, to identify this way, you can't quote unquote trick, or deceive anyone because that would be bad or wrong or something like that. I think Facebook kind of um, has an interesting problem on their hands when they get to the point where those codec avatars are going to come out, and some people are going
What
to
is this?
reject
I'm
them.
sorry. What is this?
The codec avatars, the avatars where they use like hundreds of cameras. Right now, it's hundreds of cameras in a dome, and you're sitting down, and they take like thousands of photos, and they make it so that you have a real representation of like your face, your
Mm.
body, your gait when you walk, um, that kind of stuff. And they're trying to make it, as far as I know, they're trying to perfect it and then miniaturize it so they can deploy it into their own suite of software. You should look into it. I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. You probably just don't.
Maybe I'll have to look into it more that connect the dots. But yeah, as you said that, I'll be honest, I'm a little ambiguous on what you're going over, but I will look into this a little bit more. When it goes to, we've done a lot of conversations where I feel like this is why I like this platform, where we kind of can go where we want. I feel like we touched a lot. I know you and I spoke originally. You had some points. Have we missed anything on this list? Because as I speak with you, I will be honest, my mindset has shifted to where I thought this conversation was going to go. I thought it was going to go in a different direction. However, I feel like we've probably glossed over some of the deeper parts that maybe are a little less represented. I want to give the floor to you for a second in case I've directed the conversation away from these points that need to be spoken about, because people like yourself were willing to put your voice out there, contrary opinions to my own. I value that. I thank you, man. But please, if we've glossed over something, let's get into it.
Yeah, and I appreciate giving the platform to be able to talk about these issues. And you know, uh, I think ultimately it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. I do think we've covered a lot of it. Um, I think another kind of aspect of this is just the going back to this idea. What I really want to kind of pinpoint is this idea of that it's ever changing, and I really, really think that that is a dangerous thing. That hate speech today can be really, at this point, it can be really anything. If enough people dislike something that's said, they can claim it as hate speech if they take enough offense to it. And I think a good thing to kind of point out is that offense is taken, not given. So, if someone is offended by something, it's on their own emotional regulation for the most part, to deem, how to best respond to that. I think, if you are which this isn't everyone obviously, but if you're a healthy person with a healthy, emotional state, and you're in the right mind frame, set of frame of mind, then a lot of people can take what's being said and brush it off. I think that it's those people who are susceptible to kind of um, vulnerability that they're trying to protect with these hate speech policies. Otherwise, why would even if everyone could just roll it off, why would you even have that? But I think to go back to actually pinpoint it though, with it ever changing. I know this is going to be a pretty divisive thing, but I just wanted to point it out because I think it is important. So last year, I think it was in October of last year. Um, and I don't mean to be political at all when I say this. I'm just using this as an example of something where hate speech was created. There was a hearing with Amy Coney Barrett for her confirmation hearing into the U.S. Supreme Court, and she was asked a question by one of the senators about LGBTQ issues. And she responded to that question with saying basically that she doesn't discriminate on sexual preference. So the literally, I think it was the next day. The next day, Senator Mazie Hirono chastised her and basically said that you used the term sexual preference when responding to a question that was posed to you about LGBTQ issues. Don't you know that that's hurtful, that's hateful, that's bigoted, that's an old, outdated term that no one's used before? Well, of course, the words are sexual preference. Now, Might she have used a different word? That's debatable. But in response to Maisie Hirono doing that, Merriam-Webster dictionary changed the dictionary definition of hate speech to conform to or to support Maisie Hirono's attack on her in the Senate hearing or the confirmation hearing. Um, that's something I know it's a very, very like very specific example, but that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about when I'm afraid of the overarching nature of it. Because literally the day before it was not considered hateful until she said that, and then the dictionary definition literally got changed the very next day. And this is not something where I'm just coming up with some kind of overblown conspiracy. Snopes.com, uh, it's fact check at Snopes.com that they changed this not because they claim that it's not because she said that, but because of the public outcry after she said that. Um, and now, if you use that term, in some instances, I'm sure there are some people who consider that hateful and could probably get you temporarily banned or suspended or what have you. Um, Obviously, that's a very, very specific point again, but that's just kind of people don't know about that. People don't realize that it's not just about protecting people. It's not just about making sure to mitigate harm for users. It's much more than that. It's kind of a way to control speech. I think a lot of bad actors have used it as a way to control speech, and that's kind of what I want to kind of let make people aware of going forward. That to watch out for that kind of um, overarching uh, designation of hate speech or hate terminology or hate
Yeah.
hateful action.
I think when it comes down to it, oh, I got a little echo there, but we're back. When it comes down to it, one thing that really makes me pause, it's a comment you brought up about, the stigmas of like the virtual side of that's you, and you need to be able to disconnect from the hate and understand that it's not real. We had a discussion prior to this conversation. The reason why I can have streams like this, bring on people, I'm not saying you're saying anything crazy here, but I
Sure.
have no problem bringing on your thought process. I have no problem taking 8 steps to the right. I have no problem taking on 100 steps to the left. I don't care. Now, the reason I cannot care is a privilege. I'm financially independent from this channel. I do not care. If someone has a big problem, wants to cancel me for bringing on, I mean, let's go as far right as we can or far left. Biden or Trump. I do not care. If it triggers you, it doesn't affect me, IRO. This is good discussion to me. It's what makes me happy. It's what I want to do. But I am financially independent from this, so I have no stakes in it. However, that does change with VR. We keep bringing up how that's more lifelike. That is you.
Right.
If we're talking social, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all this stuff, if your net worth is based on your social worth, there's a problem. You can't disconnect. But if it's not, then you technically can. But if I go into VR chat, is it possible for me to socially disconnect from my avatar, or is that me? And now anything that happens in there, to say my net worth isn't affected by my status in VR chat might be disingenuous because in a way
Mhm.
that's me. So yeah,
Yeah.
actually my net worth is directly related to my worth in VR chat because I can't that's me. I can't fake
Sure.
it. So that's
And,
something
and
I
and
think
you
about.
and you can't know that until years down the road. You can't know that until it's what if VR is the most. I'd love VR to be more mainstream than it is now and to be ubiquitous in every home. I'd like that. I want that future. But if we do have that kind of future, who's to say that right now your employer can go and look up your Facebook, all your social media, and they
Hmm.
can dictate whether they want to hire you, fire you, bring up an issue with you, things like that, um, just because they have that option. Well, now you have an entire body of not just what you've said, but possibly how you move, who you talk to, what you talk about, and it's not that anyone's recording every second of every day. But if you do something that's considered harmful to someone or hateful to someone, and I don't want to use face, I don't want to keep using Facebook, like HTC's platform, with their new platform that's trying to integrate all of these different, work, play, all that kind of stuff into one. Um, uh, if you do that, who's to say that you couldn't be fired from a job or lose some kind of revenue stream because you've created a business that's based around your virtual persona and you just happen to do something that's out of line with the hate speech policies or some kind of policies that try to, defend the users. And I think that it's kind of this it, I think we just need to be careful going forward about how much control Facebook. I know this is a tired subject. I know pretty much everyone talks about this, but how much control Facebook has over your own personal life going forward, because they're going to have all your data. And no, they might not advertise directly to you in a way that you don't like, or they might not use your, data from your eyes. The one interesting thing about it is, with eye tracking, you can tell intention to a certain extent. If you have gait movement, if you have BCI, if you have eye tracking, if you have mouth tracking and face tracking, they can tell intentions. Probably you could create thought crime with stuff. I mean,
Precog
and
is
that
what you're going
seems
with here.
what was that?
Precog crime.
Right, right. Yeah, precog, exactly, precog. Yeah, yeah. And see how that movie turned out. So, but
It's a
but
good movie, everybody. If you haven't seen Minority Report,
it's a
that's
great
what we're
movie.
talking
It is
about.
a great movie, but
Precog, where
well, I won't
you
spoil
can
the
be
end.
guilty of a crime that you haven't even committed because they can preemptively determine that this is the crime you're going to do. Therefore, you're guilty before even committing the crime. And to his point, yeah, we're taking 10 steps further than, or we're taking 100 steps further than what we have. But yes, with eye tracking and face tracking, they can determine based off gait, based off gaze, by pupil dilation, almost exactly what you're planning to do, what you will do, what you like to do. They can determine disease. They can determine a lot of biometrics. There's a lot of things they'll be able to determine that could hurt, depending on who you're
Mhm.
talking to. They also could help. You could be
Yeah,
playing VR chat and pre-diagnosing genetic diseases. It's possible. It is a big trust factor. The trust needs to come into play here on who's using that data and how. That's kind of where it comes down to it.
absolutely, absolutely. No. Hopefully they'll have a solid policy that'll never be breached, and they'll stick to their word when they make this giant policy list of things that they can and can't and will not do with the data. Um, that's a hopeful future, and I hope for that. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we have to hope that they're not going to abuse that, or have some way to have it only on your own hardware,
Can we end it on
somehow.
this? And I don't mean that.
Yeah. Oh,
And I
yeah.
don't mean that end the stream. But I want. We are getting close to time, but I want to end it on a
Sure.
thought. Let's. I don't get to ask many people this. So Facebook, since we just keep harping on them, and they are VR right now, so that's why we are harping on them. They are VR. They are likely going to be VR for good. Let's just be honest. If you are losing, as per a current report, which I will try to put in this video description that I was linked a little back, uh, they are possibly losing $4 to $5 billion a year on their VR, AR, XR endeavors. You cannot compete with that. So if Facebook is and will be VR, how do we determine their intentions? Do you think, generally speaking, Facebook's intentions are good? Are they bad? Are they concerning? Where do you lie on their intentions? Because we are speculating. We're taking a
Sure.
guess. I don't know what their intentions are, but if you had to put Bryson's guess on their intentions, let's hear it.
I guess they're neutral up to the point that they can profit off of something. So, so I'd guess that they're neither good nor bad up until the point that they can get some kind of new information that would help them gain a profit. And I think one of the ways, this is going way back, but they conducted a study on users by manipulating their Facebook feed to see how emotions, putting certain things in their Facebook feed to see how it would affect their emotional regulation throughout the day. They did a full scale study on that years ago, and they got caught, or it was reported, came out, and nothing happened. You know, uh, and I think that it's whether they have good intentions or bad intentions. I think it's up to us, the VR community, especially, to kind of keep them in check as much as possible. Can we keep them in check completely? No. But we can collectively, as a community, come together and try to safeguard against the things that we don't want them to have control over. We don't have to have uh, carte blanche, control of these things. And I think ultimately they are doing good for VR, so I appreciate that and I want that to succeed. Ultimately, I want them to succeed, honestly, because I want to see VR succeed. But I do think that whether they're good or bad, which I would lean more towards their opportunistic. So so that's kind of where I am with that. But I still champion all the work they've done, all the research they're doing now currently to further the progression of VR. I think we'll see true to life VR within, at least some people right now, Gen Z, some segment of the population's lifetime. I think we'll see at least as close as we can get without brain computer interfaces like Elon Musk style. So
Yeah.
I do think that's a possibility. So
Yeah, I say it quite a bit that like where we are in VR right now is like the penny stocks of anything valuable. Like if you're buying into VR right now, if you're in the chat, if you entertain a conversation like this with an open mind of being like, yeah, these are actually things we need to think about. The reason that you need to think about it, because what this conversation is worth a penny, like literally this conversation is pennies on the dollar of value in a decade from now, in 2 decades from now. There are people, Palmer Luckey's one of them, might be a bad example. There's Zuckerberg, again, might be a bad example depending on your viewpoints, that they
I
believe
like
more
Palmer.
people will be living virtually than IRL. And that's not to say that they're not alive IRL, but the majority of their time will be spent virtually in some sense. And I can't personally disagree with that. I am on my phone, heads down, quite a bit. Is that living or is that living semi-virtually? That's a debate. If I look at the screen time, YouTube tracks how much I'm watching the app. All these apps, you can go to your analytics and see how much you're using it. It's quite a bit. It's more than I'm using. I'm using this more than I'm eye to eye to somebody. That's a big deal. And if that's what it is now, and a new paradigm comes like virtual reality, augmented reality, anything XR, that's living virtually more than IRL. And if they're all right, which I believe they are, these are the conversations that are worth a penny now, but will be invaluable later on. And that's why I appreciate things you're bringing to the
Absolutely.
table, Bryson.
Absolutely. I appreciate you again. I appreciate you having me on. I think this conversation is great. I think right now, how many people can say they had a conversation about, an impactful conversation about uh, philosophizing about, computers' impact on modern society or whatever. Not many people can have a videography of that kind of stuff. So I think this is a really, really good conversation, good work that you're doing.
Thank you, man. And we'll end it here, Bryson. This is a topic that can be very divisive. It is what is needed to be said. So I appreciate you having the courage to come on. I don't think anything was said that was that divisive, but unfortunately, in this climate, talking about stuff like this just can take a little guts. Anyone who missed anything about this, I would highly encourage you, and it's really the best way to support this channel. It's about the only way to support this channel because I guarantee you, content like this will be demonetized every single time. Would to be go onto the second channel. I will post that right now. We will post in clips from all these fireside chats, from any debates that happen in the future. It's the best way to support the channel and about the only monetizable way YouTube will allow. Bryson, I'm going to give you the floor and then we'll end it, man. Anything you want to say to the chat?
Uh, no, just that I love this community. I love VR. I really believe in it. Got my DK1 and from then I was hooked. I watch all the content I can about this, all the research I can. I really believe in this medium, and I think it'll really transform our world in the future. I really truly believe that. So
I would wholeheartedly agree. And I feel like anyone who is hardcore on YouTube VR right now, or even Twitch VR, everyone's hardcore because they bought into that future. It just may not be right now. It may be for a different generation, but everyone who's in it right now, please voice up. Please have these conversations because, yes, this honestly, VR might be something that we're just old dinosaurs of and won't be the main user of it, but you will be the driving force of what that generation uses. I'm not saying that your voice may directly lead to change. Who knows? I think developers have the stronger say here. However, as a user, as a participant, as a lover of VR, right now, if you voice this up and have conversations like this, you're shaping who's going to use it, and you have more power than you ever think. I can preach that all day, but we will end that here. Please subscribe to the second channel, guys. Bryson, thank you again for joining, for voicing out about this. And as
absolutely.
always, guys, we'll see you next time, Space Cowboys. Peace.